Chapter 5. The Treaty. You're awfully quiet tonight, Fudgekin. Usually the customers are leaving by about this time because of all your shouting, Dib playfully said as he twirled the straw between his fingers. As it was, the bar was pretty empty anyway. It was a Monday night after all, and though they did not come down here to drink very often, they mutually decided to meet regardless. Routinely, they came here on a Monday and a Friday, for their own private reasons. Don't call me by that name, the invader snapped without looking at the human. One arthritic claw testily scratched beneath the hem of his wig. He hated wearing his disguise as much as he hated listening to the Dib banter. What, Fudgekin? But it's a cute name. The term cute is reserved for pathetic bunnies, drooling ugly babies, and plush teddy bears. Zim will not be dubbed by that same idiotic term. Ooh, posh words. Dib drank down the last dredges of beer and waved at the bartender for another round. Zim was still nursing his whiskey. He had barely touched it. Dib looked down at him. They weren't exactly eye level, what with Zim being that much shorter. Dib had to bring a cushion to the bar whenever they wanted to drink, or Zim would not have been able to reach the bar table, let alone drink from it. Everything going well at home? Everything's fine. Dib assumed he was still bitter from earlier. Look, I'm sorry I shouted at you yesterday, but you can't just go out and do things. Your memory is getting worse. I think you just forgot to wear your disguise. What were you even doing at the national park? I was getting stiff. I thought that the sap from the trees might make for good massage oil. Ger was helping. Dib put his head in his hands and groaned. You've been watching those stupid commercials again, haven't you? Look, if you're really that stiff, I can get you something that'll help. What is it? Your shoulders? Your hands? Pah! Help? Are you really so dumb, human filth? I needed the oil for Ger, yes. I hate you, you know, Dib said with a chuckle. Zim took a long swallow from the whiskey. He had never had much of a taste for human alcohol. It was weak at best, and its impurities irritated his sore spook from time to time if he happened to select a cheap brand. Human alcoholic drinks didn't taste as good or were as strong as the ones he could drink on Urk. But he tolerated them, and if he drank them sufficiently, sometimes he felt inebriated enough to relax. Sometimes he even laughed. The bar was called The Treaty, and for them it was local, and provided the seclusion they were after from their busy lives. How they made these meeting arrangements at the bar was quite unorthodox. They liked to keep in touch, just to see how the other was doing. The thing was, neither liked having the other on their home turf, so they decided to meet on neutral ground instead. Dib got what he wanted. He got to spy on Zim while being out in public and learn all he could. Zim, meanwhile, had a likewise agenda, to keep up to date on human terminology and get all the latest gossip from his childhood nemesis. After the first few meetings of the treaty, it slowly became tradition, and they had kept it going for 5 or so years. Dib liked to bitch about work and girls. Zim ranted about anything worth ranting about. Dib received his fresh beer and placed it on the coaster. They added a new member to the team today. It's a young girl. Not another one, Zim huffed, barely paying attention. He found it harder to hear when his antennae were trapped beneath his wig, so sometimes Dib had to speak extra loud to him. Yeah, she's kinda cute. Was her first day today, and she already believes in everything, even the obvious fakes. I showed her that YouTube video of the grifter, and she swore that it was genuine without any further proof. I tell ya, these days I'm proving the fakes from the genuine stick in YouTube videos. Forget the real stuff, everyone's obsessed with creepypastas and crazy videos. While Dib went on a bit of a tirade classifying all the latest YouTube hoaxes and going on to mock spooky home videos, Zim was caught in a daydream. Before him, the tallest looked down, their faces bleak with cold disapproval. You're asking us for an upgrade, Zim? Yes, my dear tallest. I fear that my current pack is wearing thin, and I need a new one to continue the annihilation of planet Earth. It's been 22 years, Zim, tallest purplehead cut in, and you haven't conquered anything. Zim! Hello? Earth to Zim! Zim's eyes widened, and he blinked several times as Dib waved a hand in his face. Yes? What? You were gone for a minute there. What's eating you? Zim checked about himself for a moment. Nothing's eating me. He looked genuinely confused. He did not get the term. He still took so much literally, even when Dib painstakingly tried to teach him the lingo of human language and its phrases. Even though the bar was filled with human conversation and the occasional clink of glass against glass and the shuffle of chair legs, he could still hear Tallest Red laughing at him. Dib tried to have a go at guessing why Zim was so obviously upset. Zim got emotional. He did not like to think that he did get emotional. He was an Urkin warrior, blah blah blah, but truth was, Zim was such a girl, and he kept things close to his chest, while at other times threw tantrums and had mood swings that made even an angry menopausal woman look tame in comparison. When was the last time you saw your home planet? As usual, Zim took it the wrong way. Why, want me to bail? No, it was just a question. Geez, Zim, you always take things so literally. So? He eyed him bitterly as if rallying for a confrontation. Don't you miss it? You know, your home planet? Even though Earth's getting more polluted every day and it's slowly filling up with morons, I'd still miss it if I had to leave and travel to some place in the universe. Zim reached forwards and grabbed Dib's beer. He took a brief sip and coughed. I'm not nostalgic, Dib stink. Besides, Earth doesn't come with the same comforts of your dirty Earth. It's a militarized planet full of enslavers and hard principles. They find out quick if you don't have what it takes to be in the Armada. If you don't get assigned to anything useful, your life is forfeit, so there isn't much to miss. Dib was visibly taken aback by Zim's response. Did Urkins really live in such a cutthroat society? He could not get his head around it. Didn't it have any memorable landscapes? No, Dib. You seem to keep forgetting that Urkins are not interested in dreams, beauty, or anything other than the next mission or the next promotion. Quit humanizing us. But you are too soft in the head to understand. You have a heart in there somewhere, Space Demon, he said with a soft chuckle. Oh, you mean that irksome thing that keeps beating in my chest? Oh yeah, I believe so. So what's your next evil plan? Zim smiled at that. Oh, I can't wait. Can't tell you. Oh no, it's a secret, but oh, it's going to be something. Dib smiled back and drank his beer. He secretly knew that Zim had no plan, and hadn't planned the plan in years. There was no way he was going to start now. But he went along with it anyway because Zim was smiling. He liked it when he smiled. After wiping his face from the froth, he turned on his bar stool to lay eyes on the room. It was quietly filling up with people. The tables were still mostly unoccupied, but not long after he turned to have a fresh outlook on the bar, the door opened from the outside and a young girl stepped in from the gusty winter winds. Zim noticed that Dib's attention was divided and glanced over his shoulder to see what had caught his eye. He saw the girl too, and though the girl represented nothing to him, it sparked great interest in his old adversary. For the meantime, the Urkin said nothing. Dib was watching her with great intent like a tiger watching a young fawn. Dib's attention on females infuriated Zim for a while back in their former years, for Zim was used to getting all the attention. But Dib's interest in girls never amounted to much, so, feeling less threatened, he had simmered down. Zim by now was familiar with human courtship. He'd seen it in plenty of movies, TV shows, and even computer games. It was usually an unavoidable plot point in most of what he watched. To him, this emotional attachment of two people meant nothing to him, for he could never understand the human brain and the hormones in play. His sexual reproductive organs had been subdued, leaving the bare essentials so that he could pee and defecate. In essence, he had been robbed of his species' own natural procreation. He could not even develop the necessary pheromones that otherwise would have induced the feeling of love that came so naturally to a human being. Thus, he was also unable to have the necessary paternity in order to protect his own Urkin young. He had been manufactured rather than born. So love, though he understood the bare bones of its concept, meant about as much to him as a hamburger meant to a chimpanzee. When he could take Dib's stares no longer, he finally asked, "Why don't you begin a ritual courtship with her? You've been ogling her since she sat down." His words seemed to break the strange spell the girl seemed to have on his human. "That's not how it works, Zim. Besides, she's way out of my league. She probably has a boyfriend at home. They usually do. Do you even know how it works, Zim? Sex?" "Watch the movies, Dibworm." Dib grinned deviously at him, and just for good measure he decided to trade a nickname for a nickname. "Just movies, Fudgkin?" Zim couldn't understand what he was getting at. "Yes?" "Oh, Zim, you're missing out." He drank down some more beer while Zim watched, perplexed. Then he placed it back on the coaster. It was nearly all gone. What was left was just froth and bubbles. "You want to head on outside? It's getting a bit stuffy in here." Zim threw on his winter wrapping, courtesy of his human, and followed Dib outside into the rampant winds. It was refreshing to steal into the serene cold where there was nothing but the breath of winter. Behind them, the noise of humans continued in the warm, brightly lit bar. It was just starting to snow. Zim looked up and brought out a claw to catch the first few flakes. He was well covered, wearing a warm little fluffy coat, scarf, and mittens, and a snuggly bobble hat, so he was quite safe from the sting of the falling snow. But snow never harmed him as much as the rain did, for the rain was a better incubator of pollution, whereas snow carried diluted toxic impurities. Dib lit a cigarette and deeply inhaled the noxious fumes. Zim stood against the curb railing, watching the silent snowflakes decorate the pavement in their dozens. Such weather fascinated and repulsed him. Urkins were not a fan of cold weather, or wet weather. Wet weather bred germs and mud, and Urkins were not a fan of the cold. Like their ancestral bugs, they got slow and stiff. He loved the summer, though, and the endless hot days where everything was colorful and clean again. But regardless, he did like watching the snow, even if he disliked its purpose. And now, in his senior years, he was finding that his joints hurt a lot in the cold. Dib watched him, noticing that Zim had more wrinkles under his eyes as of late. He'd had wrinkles under his eyes for years, so it was really nothing new, but today they seemed far more prominent, as if he hadn't slept in a while. Then the Urkin brought a hand to his mouth and coughed, then coughed again. Dib did wonder if his alien was picking up a cold. Then again, the winter always made Zim more moody than normal, and he got the shakes pretty badly. Last year was pretty mild. The worst they ever got was frost on some gray February mornings. This year it looked like they were in for a particularly cold one. He offered his cigarette to the alien, who snarled at his stench. He always frowned at the human whenever he lit up. "Want to try it? Aren't you at least curious? Curious to know exactly how that poison feels when it enters my body? I'd rather drink acid." "Suit yourself." "They are filthy sticks of great filth, Dibworm. Why do you snort them up every evening?" "Because they make me feel better, I guess. They kinda relax me." "You don't look stressed to me." Dib only smiled. "Sometimes you can't see stress, Zim." Zim only shrugged, finding that he didn't like standing here in the cold while Dib sullied his lungs. "I'm going home, Dibworm. I have much to do." "I'll drop you home. I may as well. The sidewalks are particularly icy." "I can handle a little ice, human." He started off without waiting. He was like that. He didn't like to showcase friendly politeness and often did what he wanted without so much as a farewell. Dib watched him leave, a little daunted, but not all that surprised at his proud stubbornness. He did notice how stiffly Zim walked, though. He had mentioned his stiffness before to him. Sometimes it was clear that the cold weather hurt the alien's joints. But Zim, being defensive as always, had claimed that his rigidity was due to the fact that he liked to work late, and so they had left it at that. Zim did not look back. He never did. The trip home wasn't a particularly long one, but he needed a bit of quiet so that he could be alone with his thoughts. At least his clothing kept him pretty snug. Dib had bought it for him at Christmas one year. It was quite a luxurious gift, too, and it was ironic that Dib gave him such gifts, for the alien found the tradition of Christmas ridiculous. He even went so far as to believe that it was just another trick set up by Dib. This generosity did not sit well with him, and so for the first few years, Zim never reciprocated the gesture, until that very day when Dib splashed out with cash and bought him these super soft winter clothing. So Zim returned the favor for the first time, just to see the look on Dib's face. The gift was nothing special, for he refused to celebrate this Christmas humans were so infatuated with every stinking year. The holiday season just seemed to drive them mad, which frightened him. But he did get Dib a tiny model attack ship. It could fly and everything. It was only 4 inches long and 2 feet tall, but Dib curiously liked it. It came with its own Irken remote, and just last Christmas they had exchanged gifts again as if it was some sort of running joke between them. He got Dib an Irken handheld weapon that fired 2 electrical plasma shots, and 2 only. They were not dangerous and meant only to pacify the enemy. After giving it, Zim feared that the gift was a mistake on his part, but the human never used it against him. Dib's gift had been an electric heater blanket. Zim avoided using it at first, thinking that the blanket would melt his skin off or something. However, during the early weeks of January, it got so cold that even the deepest layers of his hive had him shivering. Even as of this moment, he had the electric blanket on his incubator in his private resting chamber. The eddying wind whirled around him, sending a spree of snow into the air. As he walked, the snow trying to land on his bobble hat and coat, he wondered how selfish he was to have chosen to remain here, still learning from the humans and holding off on his mission. He was aware that many previous invaders he knew had already had their packs upgraded, and all of those Zergans had grown in height by at least 2 feet. He had never grown at all. For the longest time, he was sure he'd grow, hoping that, in gaining height, he could spike the tallest. But he measured his height every week without fail, on Mondays to be precise, and was newly disappointed with each result. He had never grown a centimeter. To him, this was unfortunate. All the other Irken soldiers had improved with height, and he had not. If Dib knew this and pitied him for his stunted growth, he'd never let it show. His breath hung in the air like a speech bubble. He kept his hands in his pockets, and at times walked with his head bent low whenever the wind hailed down with a new exhalation of snow. After a long 15-minute walk, Zim finally reached his cul-de-sac and turned in towards home. He approached the front door, and before he even had a chance to knock on it, Gur flung it open for him. He was not wearing his doggy costume. "Moon!" he yelled jubilantly, pointing at Zim at a sky filled with twirling snowflakes. "Yes, it's an amazing, ugly, useless moon, that moon." He pushed past Gur, closed the door, and hung up his soft coat, hat, scarf, and mittens. Once they were out of the way, he peeled off his human disguise and shoved the contact lenses and wig in a drawer. It felt good to finally let his antenna hang out, especially his crooked one. It hurt if it was trapped under the wig for too long. Then he deposited himself on the couch. Even in here it was still quite chilly. The wind moaned outside like sorrowful songs all mixed together, and tatty drifts of snow sailed past the window. He did not wish to go out there again until the spring. "Gur," he said, "I'm pooped. Make me a sandwich with some of that hot Guinness, if we have any left." Gur saluted and strutted into the kitchen. Zim sighed and kneaded his forehead as he looked back on the day's events. Why am I fraternizing with that Dib anyway? His mind was uneasy, his emotions all strung out. The tallest had left him feeling quite run down. I've been on Earth for far too long. And now he was too tired to rally himself back home. His versatile energy had gone, and his maniacal restlessness had disappeared with it. He blamed his pack. It was easier to blame something else other than his own biological shell. "Gur," he called hoarsely, listening with his good antenna. "Is it done yet? I'm starving." Robot. Too sleepy to move for the moment, he picked up the TV remote and flicked through the channels. Each channel represented a fresh tirade of crap. That was the problem with Earth. You were condemned to watch their version of entertainment, if you could even call it that. To Zim, it was as sophisticated as drivel. While some human movies were creative and sometimes intriguing, everything else was just garbage, which served only to hurt his brain. Gur! His late healing process had made him more hungry than normal. Some days he went without eating very much at all. Gur came into the threshold holding a plate. On the plate was a sandwich. Then, before Zim's very eyes, Gur's cyan optics turned a bright red and his lopsided grin turned upside down. He dropped the plate, which smashed to the floor. "Target acquired." His voice was commanding, and not that dissimilar to his usual inflection. A circular saw erupted from his chest plate and flew towards them. Zim just managed to leap from the couch, just as the serrated blade sunk into the cushion where he had sat just a moment ago. The spinning saw blade then sped sideways, still attached to a long strip of wire connected to Gur's integral core within his metallic carapace. Zim backpedaled from the sofa and into the wall. "Gur, this is your master! Stand down at once!" He instantly realized that the first accident had been no fluke after all. It only then began to dawn on him on how much of a problem he faced. "Target acquired," Gur intoned once more, his bleeding eyes turning to his Irken master, and the blazing buzzsaw greased through the air towards him at a formidable rate. Zim deployed his spider appendages to dodge out of the way as the buzzsaw thwacked into plaster. There wasn't much room in the lounge for great maneuverability. When he landed in the opposite corner next to a bookcase, he openly entreated to his robot. Gur, stop this madness! What are you doing?" Had Gur had an accident? Hit his head? Downloaded the wrong program into his database? Gur paid no heed to Zim's pleading commands. He stood firm where he was, utterly committed. Zim ducked low, avoiding the spinning blade by inches. He could not afford a new wound, so the lounge took the beating for him as brick dust and tubes began to lather the floor. And Gur was blocking the entrance to his base, for he stood sternly between the lounge and the kitchen, almost as if he knew this was where Zim had to go to escape. Of course, Zim could still use the front door and run out into the road screaming, but he was not wearing his disguise, and the thought of capture frightened him even more. As Zim dashed forwards to avoid being skewered, he miscalculated the wrinkles in the carpet and he tripped, twisting his ankle awkwardly as he landed. He screamed out as the blade arched above him, ready to meet its target. He cowered then and there, holding his head in his hands. Urkin military training had taught him what to do should he ever freeze up in a battle, and for the life of him, in that precise moment, he could not remember any of the training he had undertaken. Moments passed, and Zim thought that perhaps he was dead, and that the attack had been so sudden he hadn't even felt it. Then he blinked and looked upwards, expecting nothing, and everything. Gur was watching him from the threshold. He hadn't moved, but the blade had gone, retracted away back inside Gur's chest compartment. Zim stiffly sat up, physically checking himself over for injury. He felt along his abdomen, chest, and face. He had all of his claws, and his legs hadn't been severed either. He noticed that the robot's circular eyes of inquisitiveness were now back to a gentle, comely cyan. "What you doing?" Gur asked with that dumb grin on his face. That smile now unsettled the invader. The room was a mess of broken plaster, hanging bits of wallpaper, and ripped-up carpet. Wherever he looked, totally daunted, his eyes always swung back to Gur. He was breathless, he found, and quite faint. He wasn't sure if it was from pure adrenaline, the shock of Gur's attack, or because of his drained pack. But you were... It was all he was able to get out. Even his very voice teetered. Gur cocked his head at him. "Are you playing a game?" Did he not remember? Zim managed to stand. His ankle was holding up, but it hurt badly when he experimentally put his whole weight on it. Then he looked at Gur, unbelieving. Something was terribly wrong with his robot child. "Gur," he began gently like one would when they were confronting a child who's just done something terrible without knowing its true aftermath. "What is the last thing you remember?" Bacon and cheese? No, wait, that was yesterday. You came home. Yous wanted onions with your ginnis?" Sim looked at him suspiciously from 10 feet away. "Can I go outside now? I want to play with the snow." "Do you feel odd at all?" the Urkin continued patiently. "No," he said as a matter of factly. "What's odd? Eggs are pretty odd. Does that make me an egg?" Sim considered this, feeling absolutely daunted. If Gur had no idea of these changes and no memory, what could that mean? Gur was not malicious. Gur was not evil. Only sentient creatures could be evil. Gur only did what his program dictated of him. Nothing more, nothing less. So it was possible that his database or even his foundational drives had gotten corrupted somehow. In the meantime, he was unsure what exactly triggered Gur to go into duty mode. Was the switch totally random, or was there a pattern that triggered it? Either way, he had to get Gur down below so that he could diagnose the problem. It was either a simple fix or a tricky one. Regardless, Gur's resolve to kill him or at least maim him was very real. Why this was so remained a mystery, yet it left him feeling sick. He just had a brush with death, again, in a span of days. "Gur, I need you to listen to me very closely. We're going down below for some... maintenance." "Ooh, I like maintenance." Then he seemed to change his mind and his body posture drooped some. "But maintenance sounds... boring." "Then how about we play a game?" Zim suggested, catering to his childish desires. Gur perked up instantly. "I love games!" "Good, Gur. Good."